When you buy a home in a suburban neighborhood, you expect peace, quiet, and maybe a few quirky neighbors. What you don't expect is for your homeowners association to turn into a dictatorship, complete with fake cops, intimidation, and eventually violence. My name is Ethan Cole. I'm a retired Navy SEAL, honorably discharged after 15 years of service. My wife, Samantha, and I bought our dream home in a gated community called Willow Creek Estates, a neighborhood with neatly trimmed lawns, white picket fences, and an HOA board that promised safety, order, and harmony. At first glance, everything looked perfect. But beneath that polished surface was a nest of corruption. The HOA president, Gerald Whitman, was the kind of man who loved power. He strutted around like he owned the entire neighborhood. Within weeks of us moving in, Gerald had started sending us violation notices. One was for leaving my trash bin 2 inches too far from the curb. Another was because Samantha's car had dust on the windshield. But the worst came when Samantha planted a small garden of roses in the front yard. A letter arrived. This violates HOA landscaping policy. Remove it immediately or face fines of $500 per day. Samantha was heartbroken. She had spent hours working on those roses. I could feel my military instincts twitching. I'd fought against warlords overseas, but now it felt like we were fighting one in our own neighborhood. One Saturday morning, I noticed 2 men in black tactical-style uniforms walking through the neighborhood. They wore badges that read, HOA Enforcement Division. The problem? There's no such thing. They looked like wannabe cops, black boots, utility belts with batons, radios, even handcuffs. They stopped at our house, scribbling notes, pointing at Samantha's garden, and taking pictures. I confronted them. Who are you? I asked. One smirked. We're HOA security. We keep this neighborhood safe. I knew immediately they were frauds. No HOA has the legal authority to form a police unit. But I bit my tongue and watched them leave. Samantha was shaken. Ethan, they're watching us. I promised her I'd keep an eye out. The following week, I was out of town visiting my brother. Samantha stayed home. Around 3 p.m., she went outside to water her roses. That's when the HOA cops showed up again. According to her, they demanded she remove the flowers immediately. She refused. One of them sneered, saying, "Rules are rules, lady. You don't belong here." Samantha, being the strong woman she is, stood her ground. But then, the taller man did something that made my blood boil just hearing about it. He slapped her. Not a light tap. A hard, open-handed strike across the face. She stumbled, dropping the watering can, tears springing to her eyes. The men laughed, muttered something about teaching respect, and walked off. When I returned home that evening, I saw the bruise on her cheek. My wife tried to downplay it, but the fire inside me exploded. Nobody hurts my wife and walks away. First, I checked the HOA bylaws. No mention of HOA Enforcement Division. I then searched the state's business records. No licensed security company under the HOA's name. Meaning these guys were either hired mercenaries or just Gerald's thugs playing dress up. So I did what any Navy SEAL would do. I planned. I mapped their patrol routes, noted their vehicle, a black SUV with no license plates, and tracked their movements. For 3 days, I shadowed them discreetly. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was on a mission. On Thursday night, I staged a violation. I parked Samantha's car slightly over the sidewalk, knowing it would trigger a visit. Sure enough, at 9:15 p.m., the black SUV rolled up. The 2 fake cops got out. Flashlights in hand. One leaned down, writing on a clipboard. The other walked up to our porch, shining his light through the windows. That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. Evening, gentlemen. They turned, startled. Homeowner, one said coldly. You're violating community regulations. Oh yeah. I stepped closer. Which regulation allows you to assault my wife? They froze. One stammered. The other reached for his baton. Wrong move. The first swung his baton. I caught it midair, twisted his wrist until he screamed, and dropped him to the ground. The second lunged at me. I dodged, slammed an elbow into his ribs, and he crumpled. Both tried to fight back, but they weren't trained fighters. They were bullies in uniforms. I broke the first man's nose with a single punch. The second got a fractured jaw when I slammed him against their SUV hood. Consider this payback, I growled. When they were both moaning on the ground, I pulled out my phone and called the police. Not the HOA. The real cops. Police arrived within minutes. I explained everything. Samantha confirmed the assault. The officers checked IDs. Turns out, these men weren't licensed for anything. They were ex-convicts, hired under the table by Gerald, the HOA president, to enforce rules. The cops arrested them on the spot for impersonating law enforcement, assault, trespassing, and harassment. But the story didn't end there. Gerald himself was dragged into court. The judge called his actions a gross abuse of power. The HOA board was dissolved. Gerald was fined heavily and banned from holding any leadership role in any community association ever again. The neighborhood finally breathed again. People came out of their homes, thanking us. Many admitted they too had been harassed, fined, and threatened. Samantha recovered, though the memory of that slap haunted her. But she knew one thing: nobody would ever hurt her again while I was around. As for me, I realized something important. I might have retired from the Navy SEALs, but I was still a protector. Not of a country this time, but of my family, my home, and my community. HOAs are supposed to make communities better. But when power falls into the wrong hands, they can turn into tyrannies. So, if you ever see someone parading around as an HOA cop, remember this: they're not real police. And if they cross the line, sometimes it takes someone willing to stand up and fight back. Because at the end of the day, peace is only possible when bullies are stopped. And I made damn sure of that. Behind the gates of a perfect neighborhood, a dark secret was hiding. The HOA created their own fake police, men in black uniforms, armed with fear, not law. One afternoon, they crossed the line. They slapped a woman on her own front lawn. But what they didn't know was that her husband was no ordinary man. He was a Navy SEAL. And when he returned home, justice wasn't served in court first, it was served with his fists. This is the story of how fake HOA cops picked the wrong family and paid the ultimate price.